know that there's a void, and they are yearning for something more meaningful. It really is a great opportunity. I don't know if you guys have found that as well. I mean, you guys deal with people outside of these walls.
I just want to say a thought. I believe you had your hand, Rick, but I just want to add one thought to that. What you're saying is very correct, Joe. And there's a void there. I just like to change it from saying that there's a void there to saying that there's a lot of empty ground there, and it's fertile for planting. Fertile ground needs seed.
Another, in the context of the school, our school here, and the fact that we know that an enrollment may be short-lived in today's culture. I mean, I have kids leaving because they have like middle school girls will have a fight with some other girl and they'll leave the school. They'll tell their parents they're leaving the school, and they will. But the posture we have to have, as we try to instruct them properly to not be so childish, we do that too. But as they leave, when they leave, we have to have a hopeful mindset that, well, they may come back. Number one, some of them do. And then number two, they're going to have kids. And I've been here long enough to know, I see the little 3-year-old little kids, and they come in the door to re-enroll them in this place that they left because some girl didn't like them or something like that. And so we have to have a posture of a default position is always to the hope. We may win. We may win this fight. We have to always be prepared to win.
Right.
We don't win every time. We lose some fights, but we have to be prepared to win.
Right. Excellent point. So one more slide before we get into some of the themes of James. And just real quick, things have changed. The myth of secularism has been shattered. Okay, we have a long time in the United States. I would say for around a century, bought into this idea that we can be a secular country. You had a comment on that?
No, I'm just looking at your transition.
Whoops.
I forgot the subject of this whole course, but the transitions are fascinating.
Once again, mention it to my wife that the transitions were just amazing. Say, I don't know what he was talking about, but the transitions were just beautiful. She's on Apple, and she was looking at some of the transitions that I could do here, and she was having all sorts of fun.
It's an old man tradition, to blame their wife.
No. I'm praising her.
Okay.
Now I forgot what I was talking about.
Secular.
But just let her know that the transitions were great. I think I have to be done by 9:30.
Plus or minus, yeah.
Plus or minus. I'll try to make this point quick and then go over a couple of slides that we need to get to. So the myth of secularism has been shattered. It doesn't exist. It's a lie that we can live in a culture where. Let me rephrase what I'm trying to say. When we say that Jesus is king and he is king over all, and every inch of this earth is his, that is counter to a culture that says we can choose any God that we want. They don't like our message. That's why they want us silent. We've had it pretty easy so far in this country, in what we call, not just this country, honestly, but what we call Christendom. We've lived in what we consider Christendom for a long time, and it might seem like it's in decline. And I think we should be very careful not to say that it's in decline. The culture is counter to us, but I would say that it only seems like it's in decline. This is an opportunity, and that brings me to my next point. It's time to grow up. We really need to and it's part of what my mission. A lot of the extra activities I do is to just make people aware of what Christian culture is, what the Bible actually teaches. I run a blog and a podcast where I talk about these things constantly. But it's time for us to grow up. It's time for us to mature, and you're going to find that one of the main themes in this book, see the origami. I'll have to put that one on everyone next week. I did it again. I'm not very PowerPoint savvy.
You'll get there.
So, some themes from the book of James that we're going to go over is the quest for maturity, how God expects us to grow, genuine faith, trusting in God's guiding hand, controlling the tongue, we are the people of the word, response to aggression, violence begets violence, and teaching your brothers to do the same. We're all in this together. In the introduction and chapter 2, there's a lot about the authorship. Why is understanding authorship important? And this is one of my points today that I want you to go away with, because this is the chief battleground that I've observed. Is there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the Bible teaches, a lot of misinterpretation. Understanding biblical hermeneutics is a primary battleground in our greater church culture. Hermeneutics being the branch of theology that deals with proper interpretation of the text, including the authorship. So to better understand what's going on in Scripture, we have to be able to understand the context and what is going on at the time. Any thoughts on that? Anybody want to add anything?
That's certainly true if you look at something like the book of Revelation, because the average Christian today would say that book addresses contemporary issues. We can expect the beast from the sea, the beast from the land, a false prophet, all of those things are right on the horizon, whereas in fact the Bible teaches that no, they've already taken place in the first century. And that's a big, big difference in the way you live your daily life. If you walk out the door thinking the Antichrist is going to get you and you got a 666 coming on your head, you will behave differently than when you say, we're winning this thing. We might have a bad century here and there, but we've had a good millennium. And you see yourself as winning the fight long term.
Right. It informs our eschatology. Bill, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I think you all know Caleb Fleury. I alumni of Tri-City. I took him out to lunch the other day before he goes out on the mission field for a couple of weeks. And I remember him preaching his last Matins here. And he preached on Psalm 23. And he preached in such detail to the kids for what it was saying. And we've all read it 100 times. But he preached to the kids. His deliverance was so. He's now burdened with the hermeneutics of, he's coming back this week to teach Matins one time. And he says, what's important to these kids that they do not have in their head is the time that it was said and written. And he said, my whole sermon on this section of James is going to be the timing, and not comparing it to your friend today. I was so pleased to hear a 22-year-old talk like this.
That's coming from Caleb Fleury. I wonder if he'd be interested in this book, or if he's even read it, because that's a lot of that's a lot of what Jeff Meyers is coming off of in this book. Is he's putting it into the context, and he's talking about how the context gives us a different look at the book of James. Real quick, just a couple slides. I'm not going to get through all my slides today, but I just want to get through a couple more before we end the class. When Jeff first approached the Epistle of James, it was often seen as a book of proverbial wisdom, and that's really the main point that he's making with the authorship and the context. is that this was written to the Jews, the Jewish church, the church in Jerusalem at the time of the diaspora, and I'll get into what that means in just a moment. But Jeff started looking at the book differently after hearing Peter Leichhardt argue that James the Apostle is the author, not James the Just, as is often assumed. It's often assumed that it was James, James the brother of Jesus, who is James the Just. And this puts the Epistle of James directly in the context of the early Christian diaspora. Any thoughts on that?
I probably will find in the book, but it's actually the first time all my life I think that James, the brother of Jesus, was the author, but only here I thought about the idea it was apostles. I didn't have any like. So Jeff Meyers, what is his opinion?
So the only argument that I listened to his podcast on Theophilus. He says that the only argument he ever received for it not being Apostle James the Apostle, was that it was. They said that would have been too early. James was killed. Yeah, James was killed in Acts 12, 44 AD. We'll get into that in a moment. So it would have been too early. They say that the book is too well put together. It's too. It's too well learned, if you will, too well written for it to have been James the Apostle. But
It was James the Apostle.
What?
It is James the Apostle that was the author.
That is what Jeff Meyers is saying.
Yeah.
And so the argument that most people have is that that's too early. And he said, well, and Jeff's argument is why does it have to be written at a later date?
Right.
You know, and it makes more sense, the subject matter in the book of James, if it's James the Apostle, because it would have been early. It would have